Kimberly Sue Doss was just 14 years old when she disappeared in Davenport, Iowa in 1980. After calling her mother and saying she wanted to return to Houston, her mom sent her a bus ticket. On the day Kimberly was supposed to leave Davenport for Houston, she called her mom from a rest stop. Kimberly asked if it was okay for her to spend the night in Chicago with the girl she had just met on the bus. The girl, who went by the name Kathy, lived in Chicago, and the stop was along the bus route to Houston. Her mother agreed, but from that moment on, Kimberly was never heard from again. Kimberly was born on February 2nd, 1966, to parents Larry and Linda Doss. Kimberly was the couple's second daughter. She had an older sister, Shelley, who was only 2 years older than her. The family of four lived in Davenport, Iowa, with extended family nearby. Linda Doss worked as a waitress, and Larry Doss was a truck driver. Kimberly was 8 years old when her parents divorced. According to Kimberly's sister Shelley, their parents never argued. The two and their mom just one day packed up and moved to Louisiana. Kimberly's father, Larry, remarried but stayed in Davenport with his new wife and stepchildren. Kimberly's mother, Linda, moved to Louisiana and brought both Kimberly and her sister Shelley along. Kimberly and Shelley both had to grow up pretty fast. They had to take care of themselves while their mother was away at work. After living in Louisiana for 5 years, Linda and her two daughters relocated to Houston, Texas. In Houston, Linda remarried and their family grew to include two stepsisters. Growing up, Kimberly was reportedly close to one of her stepsisters, but unfortunately she passed away in a car accident many years ago. Both Kimberly and Shelley would catch flights back and forth from Davenport to Houston. They had the decision as to how long they wanted to stay with a parent. They did their best to not do this during school, but it did happen where they had to attend different schools. The siblings didn't always live with the same parent at the same time. Kimberly lived more with her mother, Linda, rather than her father. It seems she would have rather lived in Houston. As any typical teenager normally feels, Kimberly wanted to have complete control of her life. Being a 14-year-old, Kimberly felt like she knew what was best for her. She did not like to follow the rules or be told no. It was in 1980 when Kimberly decided to run away from home to Davenport. It started off as a typical morning for the household. Kimberly and Shelley were both woken up to get ready for school by their mother. The two then had breakfast together in the kitchen. Kimberly and Shelley both rode the bus to school, but on this particular morning, Kimberly left by herself. Kimberly told her mother she was getting a ride from her friend. What Linda didn't know was that Kimberly had her friend take her to the bus station instead of school. Kimberly's mother first noticed something was off when she discovered a suitcase hidden in some bushes in the front garden later that day. Inside the suitcase contained a few days' worth of Kimberly's clothes. Shelley believed that Kimberly placed it there the night before so she could grab it and go whenever her friend picked her up that morning. Shelley believes her sister was scared of getting caught and decided to not take it with her that morning. Kimberly boarded a bus to Davenport. Shelley then came home after school that day to find her mother worried. Her mother asked her if Kimberly communicated with her about her plans on running away from home. Shelley says Kimberly never told her anything, but believes she may have told their stepsister. Kimberly and her stepsister were only a year apart, but they were very close and hung out a lot. This was unlike Kimberly, and she had never done anything like this before. Shelley says Kimberly was well behaved and has never been a wild child. This was the only time Kimberly had ran away. Linda believed that Kimberly was headed to Davenport to live with her dad. Kimberly had threatened to leave and head back to Davenport when things would get heated between her and her mother. Linda did not feel the need to contact the authorities since she thought Kimberly would be staying with her father or other family that was in the area. As most teenage girls do, Kimberly became interested in boys. When Kimberly would travel to Davenport to see her family, she would also see a close guy friend named Dallas Murphy. He was 16 years old. Dallas lived down the street from her grandparents. Eventually, Dallas became Kimberly's boyfriend, but living in Houston felt too far away for her to be close to him, thus this being the reason Kimberly ran away from home. Shelley says she believes she mainly stayed with Dallas so she could have a place to live. She even goes on to say that Kimberly hung around a lot of guys and knew this may have been the reason she didn't stay with her grandparents, because they wouldn't have allowed it. After a week of Kimberly staying with Dallas, they had a falling out. We still don't know what caused this drift between the two. Kimberly's cousin Wendy recalls the last day she saw her. She was walking down the street and saw Kimberly in the car with her boyfriend, Dallas Murphy. Days prior to this one, both of the cousins argued over the phone and had not spoken to one another since. As Dallas drove by, Kimberly flipped Wendy off. All Wendy wanted to do was rekindle her relationship with her cousin. Wendy then goes on to yell at Dallas to stop the car. Dallas stopped his car and got out of it. Kimberly stayed put in the car. After Dallas and Wendy spoke, Dallas got back into the car and pulled into his driveway. The two then exited the vehicle and went inside the home. Dallas stayed just a bit down the road where Wendy was standing. Not long after this, a two-door green car pulled up next to Wendy. Inside this vehicle were Frank and Cecil. They are friends of Kimberly's. They asked if Dallas had given her any problems, to which Wendy replied no. Cecil then drives in front of Dallas's house and parked. Out then comes Kimberly from the house and makes her way to the backseat of the car. This was the last time Wendy saw her cousin. Kimberly phoned Dallas from a friend's house in Wideview, a subdivision in Davenport. She told him she was with someone named Debbie. None of her family or friends knew Kimberly to hang around someone named Debbie. Who was she? The name Debbie could have been an alias or a code for someone that she didn't want anyone to know who she was seeing. Debbie could have been made up, so Kimberly could have some space for herself. Debbie's identity remains a mystery till this day. Along the years, it has been said to the Doss family that Dallas and Kimberly may have gotten into an argument, which caused Kimberly to leave with her friends, Frank and Cecil. Frank recalls that after he was dropped off at his house, Cecil and Kimberly went for a drive. It's been noted that Frank's story has not changed to this day. It's been mentioned when Kimberly did not return to Dallas Murphy's house, Dallas reached out to Kimberly's father. He let him know that Kimberly left her purse/bag there. Kimberly did not have a good relationship with her father and had not seen him while she was in town. As mentioned before, no one knows this Debbie. Unfortunately, Dallas has passed, and we no longer have confirmation on the information he provided. At some point on March 20th, Kimberly allegedly made a call to Linda. She wanted to come back home to Houston, so her mother Linda sent a bus ticket. At some point later on the day, Kimberly called her mom again, this time from a rest stop. Kimberly told her mom that she met a girl around her age on the bus, and they became really close. Very little is known about this other person. She did introduce herself as Kathy. This Kathy told Kimberly that she lived in Chicago, and the bus had to run through Chicago. So Kimberly called and asked if she could spend one night in Chicago. This unfortunately would be the last time Linda would hear from her daughter Kimberly. Linda was confident that her daughter would be coming home, but when she failed up to show up the following day, she knew something was wrong. It was normal for Kimberly to run off to Davenport on and off, but she would always come back home to her mother in Houston. It was out of character for her not to communicate with her mother, and even if the plans had changed, she would normally always be in communication with Linda. On March 24th, Linda decided to call the police to file a missing persons report. Linda filed a police report with the Houston Police Department. The police department then made it clear to Linda that she needed to physically go to Davenport to file a missing persons report. This situation was not in the Houston Police Department's jurisdiction. This only left Linda angry with the Houston and Davenport Police Department. To make matters worse, Davenport did nothing. When Kimberly was finally listed as missing more than 2 years later, numerous errors were made in her case file. Even the simple information as to when she went missing was listed incorrectly for years, despite Kimberly's family doing everything in their power to set the record straight. In 1984, when Kimberly turned 18, the authorities moved her from the missing children's databases but failed to update and change her case to missing adult databases. This error took the family an endless amount of correspondence to correct. We will go further into this a bit later in Kimberly's story. The following weekend after Kimberly went missing, Frank and Cecil, the guys Kimberly was hanging out with, met up with one another as they did on most weekends. Frank recalls asking Cecil what happened that weekend prior with Kimberly. According to Frank, once he was dropped off at a boys' group home, Cecil alleges that they drove around and drank whiskey. After they fooled around a little bit, Cecil allegedly stated that Kimberly left on foot from his house without her coat, and he watched her walk down the street. Cecil told Frank that that was the last time he saw her. Kimberly never arrived in Houston, and no one has come forward to say if they saw her in Davenport since March 20th, 1980. If Kimberly happened to get on the bus with Kathy to make their way to Illinois and then to Houston, what happened? And who is Kathy? Till this day, we don't have any information on Kathy, but if you are out there and by some chance are listening to this, the family would love to hear from you and your last interaction with Kimberly. Did Kimberly actually walk away from Cecil's house that night? If she was going to head to Illinois, why didn't she take her coat with her? Or did something happen to her that prevented her from being able to? Cecil has gotten arrested several times and has had run-ins with the law. It's been enough for people to wonder if something sinister went on that night he last saw her. We are now back to all the errors in the case. After the 2 years of Kimberly missing, Linda was finally able to move down to Davenport to report Kimberly missing. She filed a missing persons report with the Davenport police. Despite Kimberly's father living in Davenport, he was unable to file her as a missing person because he did not have custody or authority to do so. This is why Linda had to be the one to file the report. The day Linda filed the missing report with Davenport, law enforcement filed her as a missing person since September 1st, 1982. This was the day Linda walked into the police department. Even though Linda gave them the exact day she last heard from Kimberly, which was March 20th, 1980. She even gave them the date she filed in Houston, which was March 24th, 1980. Linda refused to waste any more time and placed an ad in the local newspaper. This ad was to let Kimberly know she was now in Davenport, and she asked Kimberly to please call her and let her know that she was all right. Unfortunately, Linda did not get a response to the ad. This only fueled Linda to push further. Linda then went down to Illinois with her sister. This is where Kimberly said she was going to stay the night before heading to Houston. The local police in Illinois helped Linda as much as they could while she was there. The police were very nice to Linda and searched in different areas for Kimberly. Chicago Police Department believed that the lady that Kimberly met on the bus was someone who was used to lure young women into human trafficking. It was a growing problem in the city, and they felt that Kimberly had fallen victim to this scheme. Kimberly's sister Shelley believes this may have been the case for Kimberly. She says Kim was an outgoing person who never met a stranger. Unfortunately, this was just a dead end in Illinois. In 1984, 4 years after Kimberly went missing, a Los Angeles-based foundation that went by the name Thursday's Child, set up to help at-risk youth, suddenly became involved in her case. Don Austin, the organization's founder, came across a teenage prostitute who he believed was Kimberly Sue Doss. She had blonde hair rather than brown, but had the same gap in between her two front teeth as did Kimberly Doss. This woman went by the name Kimberly Kathleen Garner. Austin spotted her when she was given a warning from a police officer. After reviewing Kimberly's missing persons photo and confirming his suspicion, he was unable to locate this girl again. In that same year, the Doss family hired a private investigator to investigate further in Kimberly's case. The investigator allegedly determined that Kimberly was using the alias Kimberly Kathleen Gardner and was living in Hollywood, California. The investigator requested pictures from law enforcement to have the Doss family confirm if it was indeed Kimberly Sue Doss. It took 2 years for law enforcement to gain access to her photos until she was arrested again. Despite the private investigator claiming this was Kimberly Doss, the case was deemed inactive. Towards the end of the year of 1985, the Doss family gained access to Kimberly Gardner's photos. Allegedly, according to the police reports, the private investigator and Doss family both agreed that this was Kimberly Doss. However, the Doss family said that this was not true. There was also no communication with this Kimberly Gardner. In 1990, this woman would get arrested again, and from here, there was no follow-up to this woman until 2016. In 1991, Linda noticed Kimberly was removed from the NCIC and the Iowa missing persons system. Linda immediately made contact with the law enforcement, and although they had no clue as to why she was removed, they contacted both agencies and had her back in the system once again. A fresh set of eyes then was reviewing the case in 1993. This detective reviewed her case and saw that Kimberly Gardner was identified for really being Kimberly Doss. This detective deemed Kimberly found and canceled her as a runaway and closed the case. This was done without DNA evidence, and to make matters worse, the detective stated any further investigations would not be conducted. In 1999, Linda received a card from ChildQuest. This card was not any ordinary card. It was a sympathy card that informed Linda that Kimberly had been found deceased. Linda dropped everything and immediately dialed the organization, and they stated that Kimberly was found in a dumpster in Texas back in 1989. And she had been verified through dental records. She immediately made contact with Davenport police, to which they had no record of this at all. Davenport police then contacted the Department of Authority, and they stated that the information Linda received was false. The woman they found was not Kimberly Doss. It was Sharon Ann Cole. She was identified through her fingerprints and her parents. It was mentioned in Sharon's notes that she would also use the alias Kimberly Sue Doss. When Sharon was found, the Davenport Police Department was informed, despite them saying there was no record in 1999. The supervisor who took the information ended the record with, "This report concludes my involvement in the matter." In 2004, DNA was requested of the Doss family to see if there were any matches to a doe. Their DNA was uploaded into the GEDmatch and CODIS. The dental records for Kimberly were also made available. It turned out that there were no DNA matches to a doe. However, it helped put her DNA in the system to allow other matches available. In the year 2021, a new detective took over Kimberly's case and immediately noticed all the errors in the case. He made note that Kimberly was removed from the NCIC on March 31st, 2018 as missing due to being identified as Kimberly Kathleen Gardner. Once Kimberly Doss was placed back in the system on April 26, 2018, the information that was put in said that she went missing in 2018. This placed her missing at the age of 52 when she went missing at 14 years old in 1980. Kimberly Kathleen Gardner, whose real name is Shannon Jones, gave her DNA to prove she wasn't Kimberly Doss. For the past 38 years, Shannon had been telling the truth as to not being Kimberly Doss. With all this new information, the detective updated all the information into the system. This brings us to today. These errors have stayed in Kimberly's file for the past 42 years. Kimberly's case information was still incorrect a week before June 21st of 2024. With help from Kimberly's sister Shelly and their team, emails were sent from behalf of the Doss family requesting Kimberly's file to be corrected. Davenport Police Department has finally changed Kimberly's file and corrected her age and the day she went missing. After all the mistakes made throughout the years of Kimberly's case, the Doss family holds on to hope that they will one day get their answer. Shelly has taken over and is continuing to search for answers as to what happened to her sister Kimberly. Shelly now lives in Illinois, but is not far from where she grew up in Davenport, Iowa. Shelly was only 16 years old when Kimberly disappeared. As it has been mentioned, the new detective, Lauren Anderson, has given Kimberly's family hope. Detective Anderson did not dismiss the need to correct the errors in Kimberly's case. Detective Anderson listened to Shelly's request and immediately corrected Kimberly's missing dates. Doing this allowed organizations to update their records with the correct information. The other error that needed to be corrected was that Kimberly used the alias Kimberly Kathleen Gardner. It is also to be made clear that Kimberly never used an alias. Correcting the dates Kimberly disappeared now allowed DNA to be checked for a match between 1980 to 1982. This is an issue Shelly has worked tirelessly alongside her mother Linda to change. Detective Anderson has informed Shelly that they are resubmitting Kimberly's information to see if there is a match. It may also be possible of there not being a match. However, this is a positive step in the right direction. Kimberly's family has been grateful for Detective Anderson and all that she has accomplished in such a short time. When it comes to advocating for families, there is always hope when a new detective takes over, but it sadly may not always be that case for other families. Thank you for watching and for taking the time to learn about Kimberly Sue Doss's case. Every share, comment, and tip brings us one step closer to finding answers. If you have any information, no matter how small, please contact the Davenport Police Department at 563-326-7979. Let's keep Kimberly's story alive and continue to be a voice for the lost. I'll see you in the next video.